What up, guys? Swift here, breaking down Washington cornerback and the first pick of Ryan Poles' tenure as Bears general manager, cornerback KYLER Gordon. This is one of those videos that requires an insane amount of work, so please, please, please hit that like button for me, guys, and share this video with all your friends. I will continue breaking down every draft pick we made in full detail. This pick has been scrutinized by fans and media alike. Most people were not happy that Poles went defense with his first pick. Now that they have had some time to digest it, I see most people coming around on Gordon. He is a class act, an incredibly impressive football player. He jumps out on tape. His presence in interviews gives off vibes of an alpha. He is charismatic and energetic. I heard a lot of weird takes from Bears fans about this. I've heard the phrases, "I don't care about defense anymore," or "we've had enough good defenses. I only want offense." Those guys are missing the point. In order to win in the NFL, you need a great offense and a great defense. In the last 10 years, every single Super Bowl winner has had a top 10 scoring defense. Only 8 of the 10 have also had a top 10 scoring offense. So in the NFL, you need a defense that can get stops and usually a great quarterback if you want to have any kind of sustained success. The NFL has become more of a passing league in recent years thanks to pass interference rules and roughing penalties. The Bears are usually behind the times. But think about this before we get into the breakdown. We are finally ahead of the curve. We have a highly touted QB prospect and the looks of one of the best young secondaries in the league. Now, before I get into his strengths and weaknesses, I'm going to give you guys some interesting notes about KYLER Gordon. He was a two-way player in high school. He played offense and defense. He caught 25 touchdowns and had 16 interceptions. Gordon never gave up a TD in his entire college career. That's right, he allowed 0 touchdowns at Washington. He joins Brisker and Velus Jones as another member of Bruce Feldman's freak lists. That's right, Poles chose athletic freaks with all 3 of his day 2 picks. KYLER has a background in dancing that has helped him with his elite footwork. He also has some kung fu in his background as well. He was all Pac-12 first team and held QBs to a 49.1 rating when targeting him. Now let's talk about the strengths of KYLER Gordon's game. He has absolutely elite athleticism, natural cover skills, extremely fluid hips, and amazing footwork. He's a natural athlete with twitchy movement skills and explosion. He has elite closing burst and acceleration. He's natural in zone coverage and in man coverage. He has high IQ and is a team leader. He's physical and able to shed blocks and attack the run game. He attacks the ball in the air and he shows great hands. He is a true playmaker, elite change of direction skills. He has an incredible amount of upside. He's extremely athletic with next level burst. Even if he takes a misstep or gets beat, he has insane fluidity and can flip his hips and burst away to recover ground. He uses his speed, burst, and IQ to give wide receivers cushion and then break on the play in a flash. He is a legit playmaker in the secondary. He is also physical at the line of scrimmage and able to jam receivers and throw them off their routes. He also has the footwork and speed to stick with receivers after the jam. He plays like an alpha on the field and he brings the boom when tackling. He's very physical and aggressive, both in coverage and when playing the run. He reads the quarterback's eyes and has a knack for jumping routes. He's also adept at playing the ball downfield by finding the ball and having the awareness to read the receiver's eyes and hand movements. Another strength of his that could be key to him becoming one of the best corners in this class are his elite ball skills. He can track the ball in the air and attack it at its high point. He shows the skills to grab plenty of interceptions in the NFL. He has everything you want from an early round draft pick. It's hard to find many flaws in Kyler Gordon's game, but I'm going to try my best and let's go over his weaknesses. He can be overly physical at times and draw the occasional pass interference flag. He only has 1 year of full-time starting experience. Gordon plays the game with great instincts and patience, but he can occasionally be too patient. There are times where he lets his receivers or backs on screenplays get yardage as he diagnoses. With Gordon's frame and athleticism, I would like to see him use his leverage a bit more in physical matchups. He also missed a few tackles, and even though he's very good against the run, he needs to work on his tackling form and be a bit more consistent. Gordon is very fast, and he can stick with wide receivers all over the field. But the one area he could struggle is running with wide receivers deep. He has great initial burst and speed, but his long speed would be a big concern against guys like Tyreek Hill or Jameson Williams. Bottom line, it's really hard to find any weaknesses in Gordon's game. I had to be a bit nitpicky to find the ones I did. He has the IQ, athleticism, instincts, size, and all the potential to develop into a true lockdown corner and a star in this league. His biggest issues are things that can be corrected with good coaching. He's a true playmaker and a guy who should have went in the first round. His 4.5 speed is the only thing that could stop him from becoming a true lockdown corner, but Flus should use him in zone more than he does man, and Gordon is a dream fit for a zone scheme. His instincts and playmaking ability should be on full display. He also comes in across from ascending star Jalen Johnson on the other side. This should allow Gordon to grow without having to face the opposing team's number one wide receivers that much. Another thing I wanted to talk about just a bit was Washington's elite secondary. Washington had an elite secondary for years. Gordon paired with first-round pick Trent McDuffie to be the best cornerback duo in the nation last year. However, Gordon wasn't a full-time starter his first 2 seasons. Due to guys like Elijah Molden and Byron Murphy, Washington has excelled at churning out high-quality corners ever since Marcus Peters. Gordon finally was set to take over full-time in 2020, but COVID shortened his season to only 4 games. He then took over full-time in 2021 and paired with McDuffie to give Washington not 1, but 2 lockdown cornerbacks. Gordon never gave up a touchdown in his career and keeps getting better. It has to be said that even though McDuffie went in the first round, many scouts view Gordon as the better long-term prospect, which brings me to my next point. Best player available. Ryan Poles drafted the best player on his entire board. This isn't really a question. Most scouts had Gordon as a legit first-round pick. He did slide down draft boards a bit after running a 4.5 40, but he was still a legit first-round talent. He should be the starter opposite of Jalen Johnson starting this year in week 1. There simply was not a wide receiver on the board that was even close to the prospect that Gordon is. I love Pickens and Pierce, but neither guy is a complete prospect and both have holes in their game. Some people want to argue we should have taken him with the second pick, but you definitely cannot argue that here. The reach for either guy would have been just that, a reach, which is another reason I had talked a lot about trading down. Could Poles have traded down and gotten a wide receiver instead? It's possible. Would he have found a prospect as elite as Gordon? No way. Poles stuck to his board and took the best player available, and after watching tape on Gordon, it's hard to argue this one at all. A great defense is an offense's best friend. Also, to those people saying defense doesn't matter anymore, I already mentioned it once, but let me say it again. The last 10 Super Bowl winners had a top 10 scoring defense. Just that, guys. Defense still matters. You just need to be able to score if you get the ball with less than 2 minutes left in a game. Now I want to get into what we have in this new secondary. Chicago's own no fly zone or Legion of the Boom 2.0. I think that landing Brisker with our second pick in the second round makes this one even better. I love Kyler Gordon's game, but pairing him with Jaquan Brisker does wonders for our secondary. Gordon and Jalen Johnson give us a dynamic cornerback duo for years to come. And then having Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker as our safety duo should give us one of the most dynamic secondaries in the entire league. We also have a few guys capable of playing slot in Tavon Young, Greg Stroman Jr., and possibly even Thomas Graham Jr. Graham can also play outside in the nickel if Flus wants to move Gordon inside to mix it up. All the moves we made in the secondary also benefit Eddie Jackson. He should be able to play to his strengths and make plays this year. Last year, we had one of the worst secondaries in the entire NFL. During the second round of this year's NFL draft, Ryan Poles changed that. I believe we should have one of the most dynamic secondaries in the league this season and possibly the best in the entire NFL moving into 2023 and beyond. Now, let's get into my grades. Let's start off with his measurables. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, 22 years old, and runs a 4.52 40. Now I'll talk about his run defense. He is aggressive and physical against the run. He excels at shedding blocks, but he did have times where he would struggle. He misses the occasional tackle and can take some weird angles, but overall he is very good versus the run, and he should help the Bears immediately in this area. He gets an 8.4 from me. Next up is his pass coverage. Gordon excels in man coverage and zone coverage. He can play inside, at the nickel, or outside on the boundary. He has natural instincts, elite burst, and great ball skills. I give him a 9.5 in pass coverage. Next up is his playmaking. Gordon is a true playmaker. He started his career slowly in this area, but he excelled last year. He uses his IQ and athleticism to bait quarterbacks into making throws and then bursts on to make a play. His playmaking should translate to the NFL and continue improving. It's a solid 9.5 is my score. Now we'll get to his athleticism. He has elite athleticism that simply cannot be taught. He is fluid and twitchy with next level burst. He is a true freak athlete and gets a perfect 10. Next up is his fit, and he's also a perfect fit for Flus's scheme, and he should be on the field day one. Like all rookies, he will have growing pains, but he should develop into the perfect zone corner that Flus loves. He also has the versatility to play nickel and can blitz the quarterback as well. His overall grade, I'm giving him a 9.5 out of 10. That's an insane score. He is a legit blue chip prospect and should be one of the most talented players on our team. My upside comparison for Kyler Gordon is a more physical Josh Norman style corner who can lock players up in man coverage and dominate in zone coverage. My closest comp I could find other than that is a young Stephon Gilmore. That's how good I think this kid is. My downside comp, which is what I think you will at least get out of him, is Kyle Fuller. I think Gordon's floor is Kyle Fuller, where he'll be okay in man coverage, much better in zone, and then physical and pretty good versus the run. My final thoughts. Kyler Gordon is a baller who never gave up a TD in his entire collegiate career. He is a perfect fit for this scheme, a perfect fit for this city, and a player fans are going to love. He has the swagger and personality to be a fan favorite early on. He's an athletic freak who is versatile, aggressive, physical, and great versus the run and the pass. He will help transform a terrible secondary into one of the most exciting and dominating in the entire league. He has everything you would want from a first round pick, yet Ryan Poles got him in the second round. This should end up being an awesome first pick for the Ryan Poles era. One final point I want to make about Kyler Gordon and this defense. I already touched on how I feel that we need a good defense and a good offense to win. Now I want to touch on what the average fan can get out of this pick. Justin Fields is going to be a playmaker, and all fans' eyes will be glued to the screen when our offense takes the field. I am excited every time Fields steps out there. What does this have to do with Gordon? I am now almost as excited to see this secondary play. In my honest opinion, we have the most talented quarterback in team history, and we now also have the most talented secondary, possibly in team history as well. There will be growing pains from both sides, and our roster is not complete yet. But as a fan, how can you not be excited to watch this young quarterback and young secondary grow together? This team is going to be so fun to watch. This is why I'm so against the narratives and the negativity. As Bear fans, we have been through so much. We finally have legitimate hope, and yet there are so many fans out there that have given up already and spend all day complaining. Those are not the guys you should be following or watching. Special shout out to my guy Jordan Silveira, who's joined me for every one of these breakdowns. About to get into me and him discussing this pick and how it fits. Also, if you guys haven't checked out the Velus Jones video yet, please check that one out. I put a ton of work into it. It's awesome. Jordan also joins me at the end of that one as well. And then I'll have some reactions and more at the end. Stay tuned. Please hit that like button and bear down. What up, guys? Swifty here with my boy Jordan. We're talking today, of course, about Kyler Gordon, which was Ryan Poles' first ever pick as Bears general manager. I think obviously most fans wanted wide receiver there. I think Jordan's gonna have a little bit different take than me on this one. But Jordan, go ahead and say hi to everybody, and go ahead and give me your thoughts on Kyler Gordon.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Jordan T Silveira on Twitter. You can get used to me here on the channel. I pop in with Swifty every here and there. Swifty, I think you brought up a good point with Kyler Gordon, just the idea that it was his first pick. It will be forever attached to him and a defining pick. And this may come across negative. I don't think it should be, but I think it was safe. I think it was a fine pick. I think Kyler Gordon, in many ways, and you won't probably hear this a lot, but to me, he was a tier 1.5 corner. And what that means is I think he's a step down from the top of the heap, the Sauce Gardners, Derek Stingley's, Andrew Booth's, Kyer Elam's. But I also think he's a step above the Kobe Bryant's, Martin Emerson's, Marcus Jones, players of that nature, Monteric Brown's. So I don't think the value is bad. I think I may differ a little bit that he was some dramatic steal at 39. Uh, but I think that he has an incredible ceiling that if he can reach that ceiling, he can be a truly phenomenal player. Some not quite this freaky. And again, you're talking about pick 39 versus pick 3, but I do see a little bit of Patrick Peterson in his game. And he's a player that, again, maybe he's not your all star returner. Maybe he's not truly 4.3 speed. But when you look at the closing burst on the field, and you look at the athleticism, some of the ball skills, some of the ability to control his body, to make outstanding interceptions and plays. And he is kind of a heat seeking missile. He will lay the wood and try to be physical and tackle and fit the run. I see a player that has a lot of the prerequisite traits that you're looking for. I do think, however, that a concern I have, and this is really the only concern I have, but it is big. It's why you may not love Trent McDuffie, but Trent McDuffie went ahead of Kyler Gordon for this reason. They are the yin and the yang of Washington's secondary, where Trent McDuffie is a little more technical, maybe lacks some of the high end athletic traits and skills that Kyler Gordon has. Kyler Gordon's big issue to me is that he relied on his athleticism to bail himself out at the college level by being overly aggressive, biting on double moves, taking chances that I don't think I would advise him to do in the NFL. Now, you're hoping that, Alan Williams and Coach Rowe of the DBs will coach up some of that technique so that he's not getting burned on double moves. But again, we're pitching the idea of hope and promise here. If he becomes that high end player, this is going to be a little crazy to some. I think he's a better player than Jalen Johnson. And Jalen Johnson's a great player. And Swifty, I'm going to kind of shut up here because I've been taking all the limelight, but I think you can talk about, and I'll piggyback off of this, the idea of how as I just mentioned, a yin and a yang with Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon. You get kind of the best of both worlds. You get your chocolate and vanilla ice cream together, your peanut butter and jelly, with having Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon, where one is a man specialist and the other is playing off ball, off coverage, and crashing on driving on the ball, driving on passing routes, and forcing PBUs, hitting the player, separating on the ball, as well as securing interceptions.
Yeah, that's a perfect point, Jordan, man. And that's what one of the things I love about the Kyler Gordon pick is how he fits not only within our secondary, but also with Jalen Johnson. Not only the points you made where he's better in zone and also is better at attacking the run, crashing, blitzing, but also he's shiftier, more athletic, and he can slide down into the slot and cover those guys that Jalen Johnson struggled with. We all saw Jalen last year when Devontae Adams moved into the slot. He cooked him. He couldn't stay with Cooper Kupp in the slot. He's way better out on the boundary. He's a physical outside corner. Kyler Gordon gives you that versatility where he can slide down in the slot if you have a guy who's creating a matchup. And that's one thing I love about him. I love, you said, the peanut butter jelly, the yin and the yang, whatever you want to call it. And it's the same with Brisker and Eddie Jackson. And it's something that I love about this secondary. But to your point there, the issues with Kyler Gordon are coachable. They're not things, he has such elite athleticism that his ceiling is up there with guys like the Sauce Gardner and actually, to me, above Trent McDuffie. What's your take on that?
I tend to agree. I mean, I tend to value players on their floor more than their ceiling. Because at the end of the day, and that's a flavor thing. That is how one scouts versus another's preference. And I look at it because at the end of the day, we can all project what the ceiling would be. But at the end of the day, let's kind of try to assess it the very base level percent better. Who is the guy that we're getting? And I think that's why a guy like Trent McDuffie went ahead. I think Trent McDuffie's a little more of my flavor because he's so technical. He's even a better tackler. And as much as I'm willing to say that Kyler Gordon lays the wood and will fit the run, everything about Trent McDuffie is textbook. But even I, as much as I'm telling you I appreciate Trent McDuffie, have to acknowledge that I don't take that comparison to Patrick Peterson lightly. If Kyler Gordon can really reach his highs, you're talking about having a Patrick Peterson like athlete. And that's freaky. That is, you brought up a good point that I didn't even get to touch on, which I really think is important, is the thing that really opens up the game for Kyler Gordon is that he truly can play nickel. And it's important because at his size, you're finding in the league nowadays a propagation of the idea of let's put power slots in. Let's put Drake London. Let's put Mike Evans. Let's put these big physical guys in the slot and try to beat up on a traditional smaller nickel corner. And you can put Kyler Gordon there. And a lot of people don't realize that when you're playing corner in slot corner, you are now opening up the entire route tree. You have to be able to flip your hips both ways. Every single route's on the table. You have to be athletic enough to fight and be able to stay in phase in the hip pocket of every single route against also a freakily big guy who is going to try and fight you and attack at the catch point.
Yeah, it's a
And
different, definitely a
Yeah,
different
Kyler Gordon
skill
has
set.
that.
Yeah.
Kyler Gordon can do that from the slot and truly match and play in the pocket, understanding how to stay in phase against the best receivers. If you want to put Justin Jefferson inside, not a problem. Whereas, admittedly, and this is not a shot on Jalen Johnson, but Jalen Johnson did not show that same hip flexibility to be able to truly open up his hips both way and be fluid in a manner to play the entire route tree from inside. He is much more of a press bail guy that enjoys having the boundary to assist him.
Yep. No, that's a perfect point, and that's where they kind of fit perfectly together. And Kyler Gordon has that ability, and it's something that Poles has shown frequently throughout this offseason. They like to bring in guys that can do specific things as well, and they looked for that in some of the cheaper guys they signed, like Dane Cruikshank. He's able to come in and match up with tight ends. Tavon Walker's able to be that slot corner, but there isn't the guys that you mentioned, like the big physical, when they're bringing the big wide receivers down in the slot, the Devontae Adams, guys like that. It's the small corners. They all of a sudden their skill set's different because yeah, they have to guard those, but then all of a sudden most of those slot corners are smaller, more shifty guys, And when all of a sudden you put in a big bodied wide receiver that can just body him out and use leverage, they lose that game 9 times out of 10. And Kyler Gordon, and that's one thing where I haven't even touched on it much yet, but he has that elite ability where he can be the guy that can shut those down. And if you have a guy like that, that could be extremely important moving forward in today's NFL with the way offenses are shifting and featuring more of those bigger bodied slot receivers.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's a critical thing. And that's why I really want to keep harping on it, is the idea that he is a willing tackler. And the reality is, with defenses now shifting to too high middle field open, you are removing a player, a defender, from the box. And so it incentivizes offenses to run it at that +1 advantage. And so it's critical that your nickel corner, if you want to put that big power slot in, for example, and you bring Kyler Gordon inside, it's critical that your nickel corner is also able to stack and shed blocks and fit the run. And the thing that Kyler Gordon does on tape, you can see it everywhere, is that it's never a concern that he's willing to put his nose in the dirt, drive his face mask through offensive receivers, and is a willing tackler, is willing to fit the run. And that is something that, I mean, I hate to kind of throw a little shade on Eddie Jackson, but everybody knows a particular DB on, the Chicago Bears that is a little hesitant to do the dirty work and fit the run, play the tackle game.
And that's a good thing why he luckily won't have to do that anymore with the additions
Correct.
we've made to the secondary. That's a good thing. I did notice one of my nitpicks on Kyler Gordon was, though, he is really good at playing the run. He will give up his body. He's physical. He's aggressive. He did have some problems shedding blocks occasionally, and he does take some weird angles at tackles sometimes. And will kind of like Brisker will just throw his body at a guy, and it's one of those things where worries me a tiny bit, but it's something that can be coached out of them both. And that's the biggest thing for me. Both these guys were, with Brisker and Gordon, they're such athletic freaks and have so much upside. And if we have a good coaching staff, and I believe Flus is, and that defensive staff's going to be great, they're going to get the most out of these guys. And there's going to be some bumps along the road. I don't expect them to be elite early on, but I think those guys are going to be great, and we're going to have one of the best secondaries in the league. Go
I
ahead.
totally agree, and I think what you brought up such a good point, which is, I mean, a term in scouting is like, and Ryan Poles has mentioned this, funny enough, but don't tell me what he can't do, tell me what he can. And some of these things, and this is where again I differ a tiny bit in, as a fanalist, a minor scout, if you will, where you do want to scout for traits. And so while I'm a big technique guy, I don't want to have to try to coach up the textbook techniques and intricacies of the game. At some points, you just got to say, look, sure, maybe he whiffs on a few tackles, but it's not for a lack of effort. We know that he's willing to throw his body into reckless abandon to try and fit and tackle. If we can just harness that effort and provide intricacies on the tackling and wrapping up and taking the right angles, now you have a guy that's throwing his body with reckless abandon, but actually hitting the target. And that's the thing. I mean, this goes back to the idea with Kyler Gordon, where I'll admit I don't love the fact that he's so aggressive that he puts himself in bad position and then says, "Well, I'm an athlete. I can get back in place and recover." I think that works at the college level. I'm not sure it's going to work at the pro level, but the idea is that if you can coach up the intricacies and coach up his technique to make sure he's not putting himself out of position, then all of a sudden it's kind of what Ryan Poles said right after the draft, is that you have this guy that's showing these elite traits from his background with dancing and kung fu, where his body control and his ability to find and locate and track the ball in air allows him, if he's in position, not out of position trying to recover, to make elite plays that you wouldn't otherwise see. And so really you're seeing some of that bet of, we're trying to thread the needle of having a high floor, but also seeing what is the high ceiling. And I think that, as Flus has said many times, he wants to have good teachers on the staff so that you get a guy who has a decent floor. Hey, Kyler Gordon can bite on routes and be a little out of position, but he's got enough athleticism to most of the time recover from it. Now, if we can just bring that floor up and meet that ceiling, we have an elite player, and that's what you're seeing with Brisker, with Gordon, even some of the later picks with the offensive linemen. So it's a wonderful formula if it works out.
100%, man. I couldn't agree more. And it's a thing that I love about the guys we got is most of the things that's wrong with them or their weaknesses in their game are coachable. And
Yep.
I'm just so excited about the secondary. I love Kyler Gordon. Initially, I wasn't as high on him, but love the pick overall. I think he has an incredible ceiling. And do you have any last thoughts on Kyler Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of touch on the idea of just what you said, and I really want to hammer this home for Chicago Bears fans. And I think there should be a level of hope and optimism that when you look at the secondary, and I mean, it was funny. Maybe you can throw this in there, Swifty, as a post edit, but Jerry Azuma actually put a tweet out today that said when people question what the secondary looks like, I would just show them the screensaver on my phone. And it's, I think it was Van Jefferson in the Rams season opener last year where
Yep.
he's running alone, and you have the four defensive backs of the Bears 20 yards behind him.
I think it's Cup, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's Cup. And the funny thing is that when you look now, there should not be a question about that secondary. When you look across it, you have two capable safeties, and that's the thing too is it wasn't just adding starters; it was adding depth. So now you have Eddie Jackson playing his true free safety position with a guy like Brisker who actually could, if let's say Eddie got hurt, he could slide into free, and you could play, Cruikshank next to
Or
Brisker,
Houston
and
Carson,
Brisker's
yeah.
your
Or
true.
you could play Houston
Yeah,
Carson at free safety and him at strong. Yeah, I think
I
there's
mean, the secondary is stacked. You have Jackson, you have Brisker, you have Houston Carson, you have Cruikshank. Oh, what about the corner? Corner was a weak spot. Now you've got Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and Thomas Graham, and Tavon Young, and
Greg Stroman
boy,
Jr.
like
Yep.
yeah, like
And then Kendall Vildor and Duke Shelley, who might not
it's
even make the roster.
like that's the thing is when you look at the secondary now, and I'm not blowing smoke here. I know you agree with this. They truly can go up against some of the best wide receiving cores in the league because they not only have bodies, but they have bodies that fit all types of skills. Oh, you have an athletic Darren Waller? Great, we'll put Dane Cruikshank on him. Oh, okay, you need the safe. You're going to run it, Jonathan Taylor at us. We'll put Jaquan Brisker up in the box, and he will literally blow up a pulling guard and shut it down and blow up the run. Oh, you want to sit here and try to run crossers? Well, Eddie Jackson will rob those routes. It's literally a secondary that they have body types and archetypes to fit every single mold. Jalen's your man guy, Kyler's your zone guy. It's everywhere. So if I could kind of part with anything, it's the idea that I understand I was one of those guys that wish that we would have seen a receiver or an offensive player taken early on to support Justin. But the reality is the whole team needed to have holes filled, and you can actually look at it. And the sad part is, I'm not sure that one wide receiver would have fixed the wide receiving core or one offensive lineman would have fixed the offensive line. You can look at those top two players taken in Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker with the other free agency moves that have been made and say, well, one thing I know for sure is that right now, the Chicago Bears secondary is built. It's fixed. You have the players there.
It is. It is. I love it, man. Thanks so much, Jordan. I appreciate you coming on, man. I couldn't be more excited for that secondary, man. You can Jordan T Silveira. You can find him on Twitter. It was great having you, man. Thanks.
Thanks, as always, Swifty. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. I really, I wasn't ready for that. Took me a second. Kyler Gordon. Look at the swag, though. We with it. We with it. The big hug. Big hug. Okay. Okay. So keep the hat on. You ain't going anywhere. You ain't going anywhere. Wait. Sees it. Stop. No. Ooh. Oh my. Okay. My initial Kyler Gordon reaction was a little funny, but you guys know now that I've broke down the tape, I'm much, much happier. I imagine if I would have broke down the tape on Kyler Gordon before we made the pick, I probably would have jumped out of my chair screaming because I love this kid. He's a baller. Kyler Gordon, I can't wait to see you play, man. Hey, I appreciate every single person that watched this video. Please hit that like button, guys. I appreciate you all so much. And until next time, bear down.